What's up, ladies and gentlemen? It's your boy JFK. What's going on? Hey, how far? How far? How far? Yeah, so we're here, man. It's another day, and there's so much going on in the news. You guys already know. I put on my flyer today, man. One of the big things we're dealing with today is the Breonna Taylor situation. And someone just corrected me. Well, not me directly. Someone corrected us online that we shouldn't refer to it as the Breonna Taylor situation, the Breonna Taylor thing. It's the murder of Breonna Taylor. It's the murder of Breonna Taylor, and it's a major issue. So someone corrected me and said, "Nah, not don't call it a situation. Call it what it is. It's a murder. It's a murder." And you know what? It could get tiring. It could get very discouraging, but we're gonna press on. So, ladies and gentlemen, we're here again. Let's talk a little bit. If you're here, let me know. Drop me a line. Drop me a line. Let me know you're here as usual. Let's share the video. Get people on board. It's a really tough time right now. There's a lot going on. And I want to talk about Breonna Taylor. I also want to talk about, what's going on with, President Lysol and, the Supreme Court situation with RBG. That's a major issue right now. That Supreme Court issue is major. So we got Breonna Taylor, we got what Trump is doing with the elections, and we got, the Supreme Court. So there's a lot going on. If you're here, drop me a line. Let me know you're here. Let me know you're here. Let's start the conversation. And a lot of people are online. People want to know what's going on with the Breonna Taylor video, the decision by the grand jury. And there's so many elements to that case that it's hard to pick one. It's very hard to pick one. So what we can do is just focus on a few aspects of that matter. Because one big question is this. For the grand jury to find that one of the officers was wantonly was guilty of, or at least indictable, for wanton endangerment. And one of my brothers, comedian Femi, put online and said, "Please tell me what is wanton endangerment." And without getting too much in technical, legalese, it's really just talking about reckless indifference in a way where you're doing something without being cognizant of who you hurt or who you harm. So there's that particular mindset. So now here's where it gets ridiculous, right? That they can find this person, indictable for that, but then separate that from the actual result of the actions of these men that led to the killing of Breonna Taylor. It's amazing. So it's almost like, they're doing gymnastics. They're bending themselves into a pretzel. All right. So on the one hand, you're saying, all right, there was endangerment, there was recklessness here, and someone died. But we're going to separate the recklessness from the resulting death of this person. And that's why it makes no sense. I would almost say it'd be easier for them to come out and say that the officers did everything by the book, and therefore there was no indictments, and that we will know what the fight is, we'll know what the battle is. But for you to come out and say, yes, there was wanton endangerment, that somebody, did something wrong, but it doesn't apply to the fact that Breonna Taylor was killed. That is the thing that makes it weird. It makes it ridiculous. You're saying that there was recklessness, there was endangerment. Somebody was doing things with abandon, But even though someone died from those actions, the actions of the person acting recklessly had nothing to do with the death of this individual. And that is where this thing breaks down. And that's why it's hard. When we're talking about, waiting for the justice system to run its course, when we want to wait for the courts to do their business, things like this make it difficult for those of us in the African-American community, those Black people, to believe in the justice system. And that's why, today is a day that's very, very frustrating, very annoying, very volatile. And one of the biggest aspects of this is the role of the Attorney General, right? So the Attorney General on this matter is somebody that we should pay attention to. One of the problems I have with him, here's the man who showed up on our TV screen during the Republican National Convention, shows up on our TV screens as a voice for the Trump administration for 4 more years of Donald Trump, while he was in the throes of this investigation, knowing fully well that there's a political bent to the entire thing, right? Because Donald Trump has been around the country telling everybody, oh, Breonna Taylor, the Black Lives Matter movement, the protests, they're anarchists. They're Antifa. So he's got all that going. This guy speaks for him at his rally, at his convention, and he's going to go back to Kentucky and prepare a submission for the grand jury. And so so we're supposed to be surprised when the grand jury comes back and says, We don't have anything with which to indict the police officers. Ladies and gentlemen, there's foul play afoot. I'm sorry to say this, as somebody who's been in law enforcement, who's been a prosecutor, I usually defer to those guys because it's a tough job. On the one hand, you work with the police department, you work with police officers, you need them to prove cases. You guys are part of the same team. On the other hand, you're responsible to the citizens, you're responsible to the community, you're responsible to civilians. So it's a tough road to hoe. It's a tough balance to maintain. But once in a while, you have a situation where you have no choice, right? You have to do the job with a sense of fairness and justice, in which case you don't favor the police officers to the detriment of the citizens you're supposed to be working for. And that's what the problem I have with this attorney general. So what I'm going to do, I want to do something. I want to play you a video. It's just one of the of course, many videos that we've been watching of reactions to this. Now, this video, there's a conversation with Benjamin Crump. I want you to get some breakdown from his perspective on the actual decision, and then we can talk after. So I want you to listen to this, and then let me just share this with you guys. So Benjamin Crump was on Good Morning America, and they asked him about this, and I want you to take a look at what he was saying.
Crump, thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you for having me.
And we know that this verdict, it is far from the murder charges Breonna's mother, Tamika, had called for. What was her reaction, and how is Breonna's family doing this morning?
Yeah, outraged and offended because, like me and my co-counsels, they want to know, did Attorney General Daniel Cameron even present any evidence for Breonna Taylor in that grand jury proceeding? And if so, what was it? Because how do they come up with a result like this? He talked about transparency. Well, show us what you presented to the grand jury, because obviously Breonna Taylor did not have a voice in that proceeding.
According to the Attorney General, no charges were filed against the two officers who shot Breonna because the investigation found that the officers didn't shoot first and that they were justified in returning fire after Taylor's boyfriend fired at them. So what is your response to that?
Everybody has said Breonna did not have a gun. Breonna did not pose a threat to the police. So for you now to say, because her boyfriend, Kenny Walker, who has a right to the Second Amendment, if you believe every citizen has rights, and that includes Black people, then she had every right to be in her apartment, living and breathing, and not be shot and killed by the police just because they executed an illegal, unconstitutional, no-knock warrant based on a lie. Because we can't forget that Daniel Cameron never presented the context of why the police were at her apartment in the first place. It was based on a lie.
One officer was charged, but not for endangering Breonna, but for endangering her neighbors. So does that surprise you?
It underscores what I believe, Michael, and what I continue to argue, whether it's Jacob Blake, George Floyd, or any of these cases. There seems to be two justice systems in America, one for white America and one for Black America. And anybody out there, not just Black people, but anybody who has a daughter, anybody who has children, this grand jury proceeding is a grave injustice.
The FBI is getting involved now. It is possible they could still be charged, right?
It is very possible they still could be charged. The FBI is investigating. Also, we're encouraging that wanton endangerment charges should be levied because bullets went into Breonna Taylor's apartment. Doesn't her life matter? So we think they should be increased there. And also for the Black neighbors. And that's why people are marching and protesting, because they feel like Daniel Cameron did not represent Breonna Taylor's life in that grand jury proceeding. He never mentioned her name in the indictment.
And speaking of protests did break out overnight, some peaceful, some not. Two officers were even shot. So what is your message for those who are angry and who are out in the streets?
Even though it's righteous anger and Breonna Taylor's family is outraged, her mother continues to encourage peaceful protests. She said Breonna Taylor would not have condoned any violence whatsoever. And so let's respect the legacy of Breonna Taylor. Now more than ever, we all need to respect the legacy of Breonna Taylor, because obviously it wasn't respected in that grand jury proceeding.
Mr. Ben Crump, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Appreciate your time, and please send our best to Breonna's family. Thank you.
Thank you, brother.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, so here we go. So that's it. So we have a breakdown of the situation. That's why Attorney General Cameron is a major part of this storyline. Again, I was bothered when he showed up at the Republican National Convention. That's, I mean, I don't know. I never got over that. You're in the middle of this very charged investigation with all the political connotations attached to it, and you're showing up at a political convention, speaking on behalf of a president who has spoken in all of this to let it be clear that he's on the side of law enforcement, whether or not there's police brutality, he doesn't care. Now you're speaking at this convention in support of his law and order message. This is you. And now you're going to come back and expect us to believe that the case you presented to the grand jury was a fair case. Maybe some of us don't understand the way it works with the grand jury is the prosecutor is the one who develops the case. It's supposed to be a situation where the grand jury mainly hears from the prosecutor right now. So this is the Attorney General's office presenting the case to the grand jury. Now understand, that's going to have a big impact on what is presented. The Attorney General is the one who's supposed to be arguing for an indictment or charges. But every indication has been before this grand jury was even put up that this man, this Attorney General, had no intention of charging these police officers. So the bias was already in. And that's why most people, you're not supposed to comment on these things until the investigation is done, until there's an indictment. But Attorney General Cameron and many of the people around him had already given this signal that they believe that these officers did nothing wrong. So now, these are the same people who are supposed to present a case to the grand jury. They now present a case to the grand jury. They tell us that there's conflicting evidence as to whether or not the police officers announced themselves or whether they knocked. Let me tell you something. When you're going for a no-knock warrant, it's because you don't want to knock. Do you understand what's going on? They went in with a no-knock warrant. That was the beginning of this whole conversation. So you're telling me that they did all they needed to do, they did all that to get a no-knock warrant. They got the no-knock warrant, which allowed them, in their estimation, they were allowed to go in there without knocking. But then they knocked, right? And you know, we've been told that, you know, they knocked, and the only person that can witness their knock, that can say, oh, they knocked and announced, is one other witness. When there were other witnesses that said they didn't announce themselves, that they just barged in. Talk less of the testimony of those in the house who said all they heard was the door, all they saw was the door knocked over. So you have all this discrepancy, and the way it should work is that a lot of that information should have made its way to the trial. All of that should have been brought before a jury. They're supposed to look at it. A jury is supposed to look at the facts and determine who's lying, who's telling the truth. What Attorney General Cameron did was to preempt, and you know, he attached information to the grand jury presentation by his own admission. He said, oh, there was a witness that said that they did announce themselves and they knocked. Now, even though there was other witnesses that said they did not, including those inside the apartment. Breonna's boyfriend, and Breonna, at that time inside the apartment, Breonna's boyfriend said he shot because he saw that someone had barged in, had broken the door down. So what you have here, so there's a conflict in the testimony, but that should not have been the basis to refuse an indictment, except for the fact that the Attorney General presented this case to the grand jury clearly. If we look at how he's behaved the whole time, he clearly presented this case, because don't forget, the grand jury has to just deal with what's given to them. This Attorney General had already indicated that he wasn't really into charging these officers. So is it a surprise that whatever he presented to the jury was something the jury could look at and say, oh, it was justified? The outrage on top of that outrage, obviously, is the fact that they were able to get enough information from the presentation by Attorney General's office to find wanton endangerment. That's the outrage here. And I said it at the beginning. It's almost like it would have been easier, it would have been better if they didn't, you know, find any indictment at all. If they didn't find any basis for indictment, and then in that case, it would have been like, all right, they were trying to justify all the actions. And they were trying to tell us that the police officers did nothing wrong, but they couldn't do that. And here's the rub, ladies and gentlemen. Tell me if you're here, please drop a line. I want to know you're here. I see you coming on. Please drop a line. What do you feel about this verdict? And I'm saying that the inconsistency here is so strong. Remember what happened when we're talking about, back in Kenosha, right? When you had this young man come over with a gun after shooting 3 people, walking towards the police officers, and, they let him walk by. And later on, we find them giving him water. This is what we're talking about when we're talking about the justice system having 2 different faces. It's a 2-faced system. Because you go past Breonna Taylor, who died from the actions of these police officers, and you indict one of the officers for endangering the people in the other apartments. And I'm telling you this, the moment I heard that, the first thing that came to my mind was, I hope they're not white, because that would just make it so clear. Come to find out, the neighbors are white. I'm still, look, if you know better than me, please let me know online. Let me know if you're here. That's what I heard. That's what I found out, that the neighbors are white. When I first heard about the verdict, I just said, I hope the neighbors that were being endangered, I hope they're not white, because that would totally just make it clear that this was clearly, a grand jury, a system, an entire justice system stepping over the body of a Black woman to take care of the homes of white people. Let me say that again. This particular case, with the way the decision came from the grand jury, is a demonstration of the entire justice system in Kentucky stepping over the dead body of a Black woman to ask her white neighbors, are you all right? That kind of travesty engenders the worst attitudes. It makes everyone mad, because you can't justify that. And for those who keep asking, oh, if people want to attack people for saying Black Lives Matter, this is why we shout. This is why we shout, because the current system is clear in favor of one side or the other. I'm going to get into a little more technicality about what the grand jury did, but I want you to understand that basic point. This decision, this grand jury decision, is the equivalent of stepping over the body of this dead woman, Breonna Taylor, a Black woman, and then going to the neighbors and checking on them to say to the white neighbors, hope all of you are okay. And literally to say, the officer whose gunshots came through your walls, we're going to punish, he's going to be accountable. They were holding the officer accountable for the parts of his action that endangered Breonna Taylor's neighbors. Come on, drop me a line. You guys are here. Let me know how you feel about this. I mean, my outrage is such that it's within a bottle, because I'm hoping the FBI will do something. The department, I say that because I know the FBI is at least trying to function effectively under Trump. I know it's difficult for them to do anything right with the wrong president. But I'm hoping, so I'm still keeping hope alive for that. But this decision is outrageous. This is unconscionable. And so you have a situation where you are asking the neighbors if they're okay, and you're putting the police officer who shot through the walls, you're making him accountable. You're holding him responsible for being reckless with the lives of the neighbors, while in the same breath declaring that Breonna Taylor herself, who died, was justifiably killed. Do you understand how horrible that is? That is such a blatant statement, declaration. How do you now expect Black people to have any more trust in this kind of system? This is it's such a clear example. And that's how I visualize it. Tell me if you agree with me. This grand jury decision is the equivalent of stepping over Breonna Taylor's dead body to hold the officer accountable for his actions that endangered her white neighbors. It doesn't get clearer than that. And that is why it is important for us to understand that this movement is necessary. It doesn't have to be perfect. Parts of the protests will be hijacked, and they are being hijacked. And, we hope the system will at least function to take care of the ones who hijack it, who rob, who steal, who are looting. Deal with the looters. Deal with the rioters, deal with the arsonists, but you will not silence the movement, because the system continues to show us why we need it. And to all those people who want to come out and say all lives matter, I have a question for you. When you say all lives matter, are you stating a fact? Are you asserting an aspiration? Are you speaking prophecy? What does that mean to you? Because Black Lives Matter, we know what that means. That's a reaction to the current situation. In the current situations, it does not appear that Black Lives Matter. So the declaration that Black Lives Matter is intended to infuse that into the current situation, so that the current situation, the status quo, will be able to appreciate that Black Lives Matter. We are advocating that the system recognize Black lives as mattering. That's what we're doing with Black Lives Matter. I say we because that's the movement right now that's getting the most effect on this system. That's the country is paying attention. So I'm not going to join those people who want to say, "Oh, Black Lives Matter. It's not my vehicle. It's not fine. Do you?" But right now, one movement is getting momentum and is getting noise. Is making noise. Is having impact. And of course, people are taking advantage of that to loot and to vandalize and all that. That can be separated. That can be dealt with. We don't have to conflate the two. The legitimacy of a movement for African Americans, for Black lives, cannot be diminished because criminals will crime, right? So looters will loot. But this is one of the examples of why we need to make this known. Again, I'm putting this question to if anybody asks you, or if anybody is trying to tell you, "Oh, all lives matter," I want you to ask them what they mean by that. Are they saying that all lives will be treated equally, or are they saying that all lives are treated equally? Are they saying that they don't see the disparity and the discrimination against some lives? You need to push somebody on that. When they say all lives matter, what do they mean? Because you see, sloganeering is one of the easiest things, one of the laziest forms of rhetoric in this current situation. But it won't get them anywhere, because we have to challenge them. The reason we're saying Black Lives Matter is because it does not appear that this system recognizes Black lives. And again, that's why grand jury and attorney general in reality can step over the body of a Black woman and deal with the endangerment of her white neighbors. That's the fact. That is just a fact. Ladies and gentlemen, let me know you're here. Drop me a line. Drop me a line. My people online today, I'm getting on Facebook trying to let everybody know, because I know it's a lot of people have been Facebook messaging me and trying to find out, what do I think about it? And that's what I'm bringing to you today. Then the indictment itself recognizes that there was some recklessness on behalf of one police officer. But what they've done is they've twisted the fact pattern. That's my opinion. They've made it seem as though the police, in reacting to the gunshots that they perceived, were justified in defending themselves. But what they did is it's the same thing they were doing with the Kenosha shooter. They always want to start the story. Do you understand what this is? The story has a long arc, right? But they always want to choose where to start the conversation. So they start the story at the part where, Breonna Taylor's boyfriend shoots at those who barged into their apartment. And then the police officers, from that moment, is where they get the justification for the retort of the police officers in shooting back. But they want to skip the part where the police officers come to the house, the wrong house, as it turns out. The person they're looking for did not reside there. And the warrant they had, the no-knock warrant, was based on a lot of things that they had presented that were not true, that were conflicted. I'll give you one of the fact patterns. If you're here, drop me a line. Let me know you're here, my people. Give me a comment on this. Let me shout you out. Let me shout you out, my people. Yeah, listen, man. BCOY always, man. Look, man. I'm gonna play the video again. I'll just give you a recap of what I'm trying to say. I'm trying to say that the system in this Breonna Taylor decision, I'm gonna say it again for my people who just came in. This is my picture. The grand jury's decision is like stepping over the body of Breonna Taylor in order to address what they consider the more important danger of the endangerment of her white neighbors. That is the thing about this that destroys it. I'm telling you, it would have been a little better, maybe not better. It would have been more, not understandable even, but it would have been stronger on their part to say nobody did anything wrong and we're not indicting anybody because there's not enough evidence. That would have been, I don't know, it would have been, I don't know, maybe it would have affected me differently than for them to say that concerning Breonna Taylor's death, nothing was done wrong. But concerning the neighbors of Breonna Taylor who are endangered, there's wanton endangerment. Do you understand what I'm trying to say? Like, her dying is not important enough to at least charge them to go to trial. Don't forget, we're not talking about convicting them. We're not talking about finding them guilty. We're asking whether or not there's enough in the fact pattern to warrant a case. This is just to get us a case. And they were telling, they told us in this that the only case they could pull out of this scenario is the one where a police officer was reckless in endangering the lives of the white neighbors of the woman who was killed. Do you understand how crazy that is? And that's why it's harder and harder to tell Black people, oh, let the system work, let the system work. The system, it's revealing itself to work, but only as it was designed to work against fairness towards Black people. That's what's going on, because there's no other way to describe it. BCOI said, let me put this on. Jury of your peers, grand jury, because there's no way her peer is young. Well, this is one of the challenges of that. The system works a certain way. The jury of your peers that we all talk about usually refers to the jury of the peers of the defendants, right? So it really usually doesn't take into account the victim in many ways, especially when the victim is deceased and she can't advocate for herself. But what is supposed to happen is the jury of your peers is supposed to be, in practice, it's supposed to be a pool of people who can reasonably adjudicate the matter, who can reasonably assess the matter. But unfortunately, if you have a case like, in Kentucky, the grand jury pool is a certain kind of grand jury pool where it's going to be, it's in the hands of, the DA. This is what I'm talking about. In this case, the DA has a lot. The DA has a lot to answer for. Cameron has a lot to answer for, starting with the fact that while this case was being investigated and while people were waiting for justice, he showed up at the Republican National Convention to support a president who was touting law and order, with the sense that when he says law and order, he meant, I support police brutality and I can't stand the protesters. He's made it clear how he feels about protesters. They're all anarchists as far as he's concerned. He mocks the idea of peaceful protests. So you have an attorney general who's supposed to bring a fair case forward on Breonna Taylor's case. He's at the National Convention for the Republicans talking about how law and order must be maintained. How can you trust that attorney general to go back to Kentucky and do the right thing with the grand jury? So my theory is, and my understanding is, it was tainted right from the start. This attorney general had made up his mind not to indict these people, not to indict these police officers, not to charge them. And don't forget how many months it took to even get a grand jury. They didn't want to do any of this. So it's no surprise, because people need to understand the grand jury is designed to work on what the DA or the attorney general presents. So the prosecutor has the job of giving the grand jury the materials to work with. So when you now have a grand jury now who's been presented with conflicting evidence, almost designed to make them doubt. So the DA in his announcement said, oh yeah, there was a witness that said the police officers announced before they knocked, before they went in. And that testimony conflicts with the testimony of other witnesses, which the AG's office acknowledges. So question, why is the AG more convinced by the one witness that says, oh, the cops announced themselves? But he can't believe the story told by Breonna Taylor's boyfriend, that who was in the house, that he reacted because the door was broken down. Now, as far as they're concerned, he's lying, right? But they rather believe the witness from the outside was not at the house saying, yeah, I think I heard them saying, where there were other witnesses who reported that there was no there was no announcement. They just broke down the door. You add that to the fact that they were supposed to be executing a no-knock warrant, but the whole case is now being put on whether or not they knocked. And I'm saying to you, if a police officer goes out, if police officers go out to get a warrant, a no-knock warrant, it is because they intend to go into that place without knocking. This is absurd. This is ridiculous. And the Attorney General is so biased, is so prejudiced, that even after reading out this indictment, that he knows is a rubbish indictment, he knows it. That's why he had to follow up with a speech about don't let celebrities and outsiders, tell you how to feel. That's so insulting. That's insulting. And you can find out how people really feel on the streets of Kentucky right now, Louisville, right? Because he was trying to preempt the reaction. He was trying to prep the reaction because he knew. Now, don't get me wrong. Whatever the results, whatever the decision of the grand jury, it might have led to some reaction anyway. But he was particularly conscious because he knew that a result like this would make for a platform for all those who have been advocating that this system is rigged against Black people. And this is too much of a confirmation. This is too much of a confirmation. And it makes one wonder, what else can we do? Where else can we go? How else can we make it clear? Because Black lives clearly should matter, but they don't. They don't. This grand jury decision, I mean, I'm telling you, man, I was hoping that the neighbors were not white. I was hoping the neighbors were not white. Thank you, Pastor. Pastor Omolola. That's no-knock warrant. You get it for a reason because you want to be able to barge in. That's precisely why you get that warrant. I was in the DA's office. That's why sometimes the threshold to get that warrant, you have to prove so much. And even in the materials they submitted to get the no-knock warrant, there's evidence coming out that there was some inconsistency and some falsehoods, but they got the warrant. Now they try to convince us that even though they worked so hard to get a warrant to allow them to go in without knocking, that, they bothered to announce. Who's fooling who here? And that's why the Attorney General is so culpable. The Attorney General is so culpable here. And he has the nerve to stand up and say, don't let the outsiders influence you to react a certain way. He knows that the reaction is warranted. And that's why, I've said this before when I was talking about one of the things we can do to change the system is to make sure we vote, get involved politically. Don't miss any elections, any elections, don't miss it. But I also added, I say this, even in that, it's not enough that you vote for people of color. It'll never be enough because you got your Candace Owens out there. You got these people out there who are, who are also African Americans, and they have come up on a decision that they don't believe that there's systemic racism. So yes, when you have someone with that mindset who does not believe that the system is rigged against African Americans, against Black people, don't expect that person to work in favor of fixing it, right? Because whether or not you're Black or white or Latino or whatever ethnicity you come from originally, if you don't believe that there's racism in the system against a certain people, against Black people, and you find yourself in a position of power, you're not going to be inclined to make the change. That's the kind of person I see in this Cameron, in AG Cameron. He's the kind of person who he's totally against this idea that there's bias. And he's on the side of law enforcement, regardless of what the facts are. And if you put into his hands the responsibility of presenting this case to a grand jury, you best believe he's going to present a case that's going to make it easy for that grand jury not to indict. That's what I believe happened here. I believe that this man set it up so that the grand jury, could easily find a way of escape not to indict. Now, that's not to absolve the grand jury, because you want to know who are these people on the grand jury who would see a case like this, find that the officers, at least one of them, was reckless in how he fired indiscriminately into the walls of the neighbors, but find that the other officers who actually killed Breonna Taylor were justified in doing so in the same action. And so that grand jury, God love him. I don't know what to say about that, but I do know from my experience that the case that Cameron is likely to have brought to them was designed purely to let these officers get off without a scratch. And that's the real tragedy here. You know, Cameron is is an African American, he's a black man, he's an attorney general, but that doesn't answer the question of what he believes. And that's what I'm trying to put forward. What does he believe? Every indication, as far as I'm concerned, is that he's on the side of those who say, oh, the noise about systemic racism is overblown. Everything he said, and not just forget about everything he said, but think about the fact that he was at the Republican convention. You know, to get to the point where you're invited to Donald Trump's Republican convention, hey, you must have really impressed Donald Trump and his people, right? So think of yourself, what kind of person, I'd say is Trumpy enough to be invited to the convention? And I say Trumpy in the sense that this is somebody who came out and told the nation that there needs to be law and order. This is somebody who's one of those African Americans who's telling us that for any African American or black people who was supporting the Democrats, that, oh yeah, you're being brainwashed. That's his mindset. So how do you trust that person to present a good case in favor of Breonna Taylor before the grand jury? So it's not a surprise that the case presented before the grand jury was such that they could walk out of there and comfortably say that the only thing that was wrong with how this went down is the bullets that went through the wall into the apartments of the white neighbors. Think about that. Think about that. So they're not saying everything was good. They're saying the thing that was bad was that the officers shot into the apartment of the white people. That's what got them upset, this grand jury. Ladies and gentlemen, I don't know about you, but that says so much. That says so much about everything we're talking about with Black Lives Matter. It's precisely this, that in every case, in most cases, we keep seeing this thing over and over again, where there's an option to use the rule of law, right? To afford the rule of law to an African American, there's always this movement to avoid it, to prevent it. We don't get the benefit of the rule of law. But when the equivalent is there for a white person, they get all kinds of benefits of the doubt. And this is the fundamental divide that needs to be addressed. And that's why we can't stop shouting. That's why we can't stop protesting. And I've said it before, if you in your mind, if you cannot separate protests from looting and rioting, you're doing that deliberately. That's on you. I believe that you have the intelligence to know the difference, but you choose not to. That's on you. I shouldn't be here having to tell you, oh, peaceful protests are different from rioters and looters. You know it. You know it. You know the difference. Because if there was a cause that you were involved in or interested in, you would be able to point out a difference real quick. Like, nah, I'm here for peaceful protest. That dude is here to steal. You know the difference. But I guess we're in a world now where you can just conflate things just to prove your point, which is fine, but you're intellectually dishonest. You're lying. You're an intellectual liar. If you are sitting there and you're trying to make it look as though, oh, the violence, without understanding that the violence that people are protesting, the police brutality, is also worthy. It's in fact the main conversation. Like somebody pointed out, don't forget, we have laws and we have a system to deal with rioters, with looters, with vandals. We have a system where they get investigated, they get arrested. The problem we have is that when police officers brutally deal with Black people, the system it doesn't seem to have anything in it for us. And so Breonna Taylor's death is considered a justifiable killing. But the bullets that went through the wall to the apartments of the white neighbors is wanton endangerment. Try to figure that out. Try to explain to me how that makes sense to you. And that's why, for many of us, I just say this: stop agreeing with people that want to just discredit the Black Lives Matter movement. Because if you don't have, let me ask you this way: what's your movement to help address the inequality in our system? What's the name of your movement? If you have your movement to address it, then you can just invite us to yours. Don't just denigrate and try to rubbish the Black Lives Matter movement while you're watching the injustices that make it necessary. And I'll say it one more time. For those who say all lives matter in response to Black Lives Matter, my question is, what do you mean by that statement? Are you saying we should respect all lives? In which case we agree with you. The difference is we're saying it seems to be that Black lives aren't respected at all. So if you say all lives matter, then why are Black lives being treated this way? That's the next part of that statement. Black lives matter. So why do you keep treating, oh no, let me get back. All lives matter. So why do you keep treating Black lives this way? Yeah, BCOI said, yeah, it said, it says, Breonna's death was just like the shots through the wall of neighbors. However, how dare, that's my point. You were able to rationalize away the death of Breonna Taylor, unarmed, no criminal record. She herself not being the target of any investigation. They said you were looking for packages that her ex-boyfriend might have been sending to her apartment. Look at the chain, look at the attenuation there. So she herself is not a suspect, Breonna. You're looking for things and then you barge in. The boyfriend shoots back. You rush bullets into the house, killing her. And we're supposed to have you walk away from that and say you did good. That's what the grand jury basically saying. You did good. You killed this woman and you did good. But you shouldn't have shot through the walls because there were some white people on the other side of that wall. Should have been more careful when you were killing Breonna Taylor. That's what the verdict means. And I put a lot of this once again on that attorney general. Let me do this. I want to try and see if I can get Attorney General's RNC speech, because this is why some people might look at it and say, "Oh, why am I on this man's case?" And I tell you this: there's so much about how you present a case to the grand jury that affects whether or not the grand jury can do the right thing. Now, forget about whether or not the grand jury itself has issues, but the presentation matters. So let me do this. I want to do this. I'm going to bring in this man's RNC speech, and I want you to listen and tell me if you think this is the person that could have handled this case.
Good evening. My name is Daniel Cameron. I'm 34 years old and the first African-American Attorney General in Kentucky history. It is an honor to be with you as a proud Republican and supporter of Donald J. Trump. I was raised in Kentucky, just a few miles from Abraham Lincoln's birthplace. Our first Republican president believed in compassion, self-reliance, freedom, equality, and justice. Sadly, there are some who don't believe in this wisdom or in the better angels of our shared American history as they tear down the statues of people like Ulysses S. Grant, Frederick Douglass, and even Mr. Lincoln himself. Lincoln said, "Any nation that does not honor its heroes will not long endure." And for Republicans, our heroes are those who propelled an imperfect nation ever forward, always striving to make life better for everyone. Even as anarchists mindlessly tear up American cities while attacking police and innocent bystanders, we Republicans do recognize those who work in good faith towards peace, justice, and equality. In fact, it was General Dwight Eisenhower, a future Republican president, who said, "Democracy is a system that recognizes the equality of humans before the law." Whether you are the family of Breonna Taylor or David Dorn, these are the ideals that will heal our nation's wounds. Republicans will never turn a blind eye to unjust acts, but neither will we accept an all-out assault on Western civilization. My values were shaped by my faith and by my parents. I worked at their small coffee shop, meeting people from all walks of life. And I realized something: no matter who we are, everyone needs a cup of coffee. That lesson stuck with me because despite our differences, we all want the same things: for our children to have more opportunities than we did, to feel the dignity of work, and to believe that if you play by the rules, you can make a good life for yourself and your family. So the question is, will we choose the path that gives us the best chance to meet those universal desires? Or will we go backward to a time when people were treated like political commodities who can't be trusted to think for themselves? I think often about my ancestors who struggled for freedom. And as I think of those giants and their broad shoulders, I also think about Joe Biden, who says, if you aren't voting for me, you ain't black, who argued that Republicans would put us back in chains, who says there is no diversity of thought in the black community. Mr. Vice President, look at me. I am black. We are not all the same, sir. I am not in chains. My mind is my own. And you can't tell me how to vote because of the color of my skin. Joe Biden is a backwards thinker.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen. So here's what I want you to pick out. This is the person, ladies and gentlemen. This is the person who's supposed to give you justice for Breonna Taylor. Who's supposed to make sure that the grand jury gets the right information. You see his perspective. He describes the protests, and he's very selective. He says people want to tear down the statues of American heroes and our leaders. He knows full well that the issue with the statues began and is essentially focused on Federalist statues, Confederate statues. He knows that the statues people really oppose are the statues of those people who wanted to keep America as a slave nation. He knows that. So this is the kind of person that we're talking about. So I for one, I'm convinced that the case that he presented to the grand jury was designed to follow what he just explained to us, that he believes that protests and all that stuff, that's anarchy. He's firmly on the side of law enforcement, which as Attorney General, he should just come out and say that. But pretending that, he cares about Breonna Taylor's family while putting together a case that will guarantee that Breonna Taylor would not get justice is the height of hypocrisy, and it's just evil. And I told you earlier about this group of people who want to make people believe that, black people who support Democratic Party or who support Joe Biden, that, you're on a plantation. That's the thing they've been spreading. That 90%, 95% of black people who are on the side of the Democrats, that they're all in a plantation. It's so offensive. It's such an insult. And the thing is, someone who has that mindset, how does he see Breonna Taylor? How does he see the protests? How does he see Black Lives Matter? He would definitely tell you Black Lives Matter to him is just a bunch of anarchists who pulling down statues. And so ask him if he believes in that cause. And when he comes out, and you can tell too, this man gave the speech afterwards. He gave a speech after he delivered the verdict, and he said, after he read the verdict, and he said, don't let the outside agitators come and confuse you. He said that because he knew that people would be really upset with this decision. They stepped over Breonna Taylor's body to care about the white neighbors who had the walls with the bullets. That's the real tragedy. That's the travesty here. Breonna Taylor's death was nothing to see here. But the bullets in the walls that could have hit the white neighbors, we can't have that. And so the injustice is so pure. If there's such a thing, this is pure injustice. Now, like I said, there's a good chance that the FBI might get involved. There's a good chance that there might still be a civil rights action, to defend Breonna Taylor's civil rights and to go at it that way. So these guys are not out of the woods. But I'll tell you one thing. Even for the FBI investigation, you normally would require the cooperation of local law enforcement. And if these guys, under this Attorney General, they've decided that they're not going to put anybody in jail, they're not going to charge, they're not even going to take anybody to trial. And again, they use the grand jury as a vehicle to get this thing out. Don't forget, Cameron did not want to put together a grand jury. He didn't want to do it. He did it out of pressure. And so let me ask you this. If you don't want to do something, but they force you to do it, can you be surprised if you do it in the sense, that's what he did. He didn't care. So this grand jury was given this case precisely so they could come out like this. The thing that makes it even worse on the grand jury and now how they behaved, they found something wrong with the bullets that went to the neighbor's house. That you can't get over that. You can't get over that. And that's why, this is such a tragedy. If you're here, drop me a line. What do you feel about this decision? Let me know if you're here. Let me shout you out. What do you think about this decision? Why do you think the grand jury came out the way they did? I've said a few things already. And I've said a lot of it I put on the Attorney General who presented the case to the grand jury. I have a sneaky suspicion, not even sneaking, that this man's perspective, his politics, makes it impossible to believe him when he says that, oh, he just couldn't find basis upon which to charge the police officers. We know where he stands. That's what I'm saying. He gave a speech at the RNC. We already know that this man is so political. Because let me tell you something. It was so irresponsible of this Attorney General, irresponsible to accept a speaking position at the National Convention at such a volatile time, knowing that he had a case, the Breonna Taylor case, to deal with. He should not have accepted that. That is not the time for you to go give a political speech. Because now that we've seen your work, we understand that you have never believed in the protests. You've never believed in people fighting for their rights. You're one of those people who believes that, law enforcement is right. And so when we put you in that position where you have to be the one to find out whether or not these police officers did their jobs poorly, of course you're presenting a shoddy case. And I'm convinced that this man presented a shoddy case to the grand jury. I'm also convinced that the grand jury might still have ended up, with a horrible decision, even if they had more of the facts that I think they should have had. But at least they would have had the chance to do the right thing. This Attorney General put together a case. If you could hear him, the doubt, the number of things that the Attorney General is supposed to be the one prosecuting the case. The whole time he's been acting as if he's the defense lawyer for the police officers. It's one thing to defend the police officers because you have to work with them. It's another thing to act like their own defense lawyer. He's supposed to be the one putting the case to the grand jury, telling the grand jury, this, and this case required, we want you to charge these people and indict them. He started off by saying that I don't think this is indictable. So it's no surprise that the grand jury that he now put together and he now put his case towards, it's no surprise they came out and said, well, we can't indict them. What is a surprise is that, oh, by the way, we can indict them for the death of Breonna Taylor. We think they did good. But they shouldn't have shot the bullets through the walls. That was weird because it could have killed a white person in next door. Ladies and gentlemen, mind blown. Because right there is the thing we're arguing. That's the thing we're fighting against. Why don't you treat Breonna Taylor the same way you're treating the neighbors? What is it about Breonna Taylor that makes her deserving of this death? What is it about her other than her skin color that makes you look at this story and say the police officers did good, except for the part where they shot through the walls of white neighbors? And I said it before, I mean, when I heard the story about, the neighbors, the shot, I said, oh, I hope the neighbors are not white. If the neighbors were at least black, I would have said, oh, at least the black lives in the next apartment matter to somebody. But no, I don't know if you get what I'm saying. When I heard the decision that the only charges that came out of this Breonna Taylor case was for the wanton endangerment of her neighbors, right? That the officer who shot indiscriminately put the lives of Breonna Taylor's neighbors in danger. That's the effect of this decision. And when I saw that, I said, I hope the neighbors are at least black so we can rule out that the grand jury is only concerned with white folks. I really hoped that the neighbors were black until the report came in that the neighbors are white. I don't even believe that till now. I'm going to go back and do research. I hope a story comes back later and says, no, some of the neighbors they were talking about were black. So far, it's like it's white neighbors they're worried about. Ladies and gentlemen, can you understand why this is frustrating? Do you now understand when we say Black Lives Matter and you say all lives matter and we say if all lives mattered, why would the grand jury step over Breonna Taylor's body to hold someone responsible for the shots that went into the apartment of the white people next to her? This is why we shout. This is why we fight. You stepped over her body to protect the white people next door. That's what you just did. And up until now, no one has brought up anything about what Breonna Taylor did wrong. What did she do wrong to deserve to die? Is there not any kind of sense of, responsibility that a police officers who are barging into a building, do they carry no responsibility? And it's just about whatever they do is justified because, oh, somebody shot at them, and which is true. The point is, in a stand your ground state, and if you're licensed to carry, if you're a black man and some people barge through your door and you don't know if they're police and you shoot at them and they shoot back, killing you and whoever else is in the house, they get to walk away free because they were defending themselves. But somehow we're not going to talk about the fact that you have to defend yourself against their actions. They caused the chain of reactions. The police officers started the procedure. And I said this the same thing in the Kenosha case, Kyle Rittenhouse. People wanted to start talking about self-defense of Kyle. Oh, they came at him, so he shot them. You are talking as if there's no precedent, there's no antecedent. The story doesn't start where Kyle Rittenhouse got attacked. The story doesn't start where Kyle Rittenhouse, where someone threw something at him and he had to turn around and shoot that person. That's not where the story starts. The story starts for Kyle Rittenhouse when he left his place in Chicago and he drove all the way to Wisconsin with a gun to stand in the middle of a protest to defend a building that he doesn't know, that wasn't his. And so the question is, he gets to do that, and it's self-defense for him. But for everybody else who's black, they deserve it. Femi Badnos, what's up, brother? He said, yeah. If she did anything wrong, they were not judge or jury to determine what they should be her executioner. And that's that's the thing, Femi. Like they don't bother to deal with that issue, right? They sidestepped that. What they did legally was sidestep that by saying, you see, once they brought in the defense, once they were able to more or less in their minds justify the reaction of the police officers shooting into the house, then all of a sudden we don't have to have a conversation about whether or not they were trying to kill her, right? So they're going to be coming out saying we weren't trying to kill her. We're just trying to defend ourselves. But the question is, fundamentally, if you create the scenario of danger, which now endangers you, and you now react to that danger by killing someone else, how are you absolved? How are you free from guilt? How are you not responsible? The chain reaction you put into motion ends up killing someone. But you get to say, well, I mean, somebody shot at me and I shot at them. Yeah, they shot at you because you broke down their door. And so the lie, I believe, that they told, and this is why I feel that the Attorney General Cameron should be held accountable. The lie that was used to justify this rubbish decision. I mean, as a former prosecutor, I can tell you the grand jury is one of those things where anything could happen. In most cases, the grand jury follows, what the prosecutor wants, because it's the prosecutor's show. The grand jury is the prosecutor's party. So when you see a grand jury not indict someone, in many cases, there's some possibilities. It's probably one of those cases where it's such a weak case that you're not able to convince any member of the grand jury to go with you. The other thing is, it's such a weak presentation by the prosecutor. Because if a prosecutor, as we've seen in many cases, on many of these cases, some of the prosecutors are reluctant to bring the case in the front. They don't want to arrest their police officers. They don't want to jail the police officer. So what kind of case do you think they would give to the grand jury? It was reported that Attorney General Cameron and his team presented to the grand jury at least 3 possible stories of the homicide charges. Do you know what that means? It means that they've supplied the grand jury in their presentation with options saying, if you don't see the homicide this way, maybe you'll see it this way, maybe you'll see it this way. Ladies and gentlemen, that is a clear tactic to hang a jury. Because the prosecutor commits to a theory of the case. That's the whole point. If a prosecutor is saying, Mr. So-and-so on the morning of July so-and-so did with intent do X, Y, and Z. He showed up at the lady's house, he shot her, and he packed the body into a suitcase, and he dumped it into the river. That's your theory of the case, and you bring your evidence together, you make your arguments, and you push that theory of the case. And so the party who's listening to you knows this is what, and they can assess that theory. What the Attorney General Cameron is reported to have done is to present multiple streams for the grand jury, which in many ways is a great opportunity for a grand jury to say, well, you don't know what you want to do. You don't know what you don't know what the case is about. So it's like they left so many avenues for the grand jury not to find the indictment. And that's why it's even more disturbing that in all of that, the grand jury was still able to find, by the way, the shots fired into the apartment of the white people, that was wrong. That was wrong. Breonna Taylor's death, yeah, it's okay. It makes sense. But you shouldn't have shot into the walls. You could have killed the white people next door. And that's the story of this decision. It's unacceptable. It's disgraceful. The Attorney General is culpable. And I didn't even get to the part where one of the officers sent an email to his fellow police officers before the decision came down. One of the officers in this case had the nerve to write an email to everyone telling them, oh, you guys are warriors, just do what you do. These protesters are not worth it. You know, he had a whole litany of how he said, oh, he was even abusing the FBI because he knew that the FBI might be brought in to further investigate them. He said, oh, these FBI punks, they couldn't last a day doing what we do. I don't understand where he gets that. I don't understand where he gets that. I mean, trying to make the FBI look less, I don't know, less brave than the Kentucky Police Department or the Louisville Police Department. I don't know how far you get with that. I don't know how far you get with that. I think that's rubbish, considering many people go to the FBI after being police officers as a step up. It's annoying, but he gets to say all that. He tweeted, you know, he emailed his buddies. I suspect that he probably already knew that they were going to get off because even the Attorney General didn't want to put him in jail. So, ladies and gentlemen, it's a tragedy. It's a travesty. Especially when you consider that they just gave the Breonna Taylor, the city settled with the Taylor family, with Breonna's family, for I believe it was $12 million, you know, and all of a sudden we turn around and say, oh, well, but the killing was justified. It was okay. But here's $12 million for your loss. You know, as if we don't know that. That's saying something about, even the city knows that something went down that was wrong. You know, so, but ladies and gentlemen, I'll leave it at that for now. Let me know what you feel about that. The other thing I want to talk about today, you know, before we leave is, ladies and gentlemen, I want to say this. America, you've had a good run. America has had a good run. And it was nice knowing you, America. It was nice knowing you. It's the end of an era. It is the end of an era because you now have a president who is ready. Donald Trump is ready to undo every norm, everything. This man's, you know, readiness to destroy the elections is mind-blowing. If you're here, drop me on. Let me see who's here. Let me see who's here. Donald Trump is ready to destroy this election. And today I have to say this. If you are a Trump supporter, I want you to know this. What you're saying is that you don't mind if this country blows up. If you still support Donald Trump, with all the evidence we now have that he wants to blow it up, he's already, in what world does this make sense to you? That an incumbent American president is guaranteeing the whole world that this next election will be fraudulent. Think about that for a minute. It's one thing to allege that there's some rigging going on, there's some fraud. This man is guaranteeing that it will be fraudulent. And therefore, he's preparing that he's going to have a Supreme Court ready to make him the life president. Don't forget, this is a man who's telling you what he's thinking. Those of us from Africa, we know this kind of man. This is a dictator. This is an authoritarian. Albeit a dumb one, but a very determined one. And the danger America is in right now cannot be overstated. It cannot be exaggerated because it's huge. This democracy is in the last piece of the puzzle to become an authoritarian country. And we should not let this happen. And I know, I'll be honest with you, I don't even know how to fight this. All I know is we have to fight it, but I don't know how because it's so insidious and he has so many allies. Trump supporters are allies of a dictator right now. If you're a Trump supporter, man, I'm done speaking as though, you know, we're all just on two sides. No, no, no. This, what you're supporting now, you've moved from being a member of a political party or a political idea, you're moving into a cult, into the camp of an authoritarian. If you're a true American, you could never be okay with this, with your president daily, constantly just destroying the confidence in the electoral system. How is that American? Don't get me wrong. You can point out problems, you can point out issues if you can back them up with evidence, which he never bothers to. But he's fundamentally telling the world that America's next election will not be free and fair. He's the president of that country. He's guaranteeing to the world that we're going to have to finish it in court. And you know why he's doing it. Every sign is that he's going to lose. Every sign is that he's going to lose. That's why. And if you're a Trump supporter, you know that. So, but the question for you is, are you really going to go along with this? You're really going to be part of the scheme that destroys this country? That's your legacy? Think of, come on. We can all disagree on so many things, but I would hope that we would come together and say, no, 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 no. Don't mess with our elections. Don't mess with our transition of this man literally saying that if he loses, he won't leave. He's saying it. And people have been saying he won't. Now he's saying it. How are you okay with this as an American? This is the Trump supporters. You are now in the phase of your support for this man. You're becoming part of his private army to turn America into a dictatorship. That's what you're becoming. And if you continue with him all through the elections, and if you're part of this group of people who support him in his efforts to undermine the elections, you have become a minion of the destruction of this country. You're joining him to end this empire. I want to plead with you, don't do it. Whatever grievance you have against the other side, it's not worth destroying the nation. This man doesn't care about anyone but himself. I said it at the beginning of his presidency. I suspect at some point he will want to declare bankruptcy on the entire experiment, the nation. That's where we are now. In all of his dealings where he's declared bankruptcy, everyone who worked with him ended up holding the bag, going home with fractions of the money he owed them because he'd gone bankrupt. And he walks away as if nothing happened. He's doing it with the nation now. He's about to file bankruptcy on America's democracy. And I'm pleading with you, don't let him do it. This is really for Trump supporters, right? Because everyone else, I think, gets it. This is for Trump supporters. Did you know that they have been going around speaking with, legislators in Republican states, scheming so that they could have a parallel slate of electors? What does that mean? You know, we talk about the electoral college. The way it works just in general is that when you're voting in a state, you vote and the count of the popular vote in that state will determine who the electors, members of the electoral college from that state, who they're going to give their votes to. So you're voting in order to determine who your electors will vote for. So let me break it down a little simpler. If we're in New York. When I vote in New York and my vote, along with the vote of others, results in Joe Biden winning New York, what it means is that the slate of electors from New York, the delegates from New York, will take that electoral victory for Biden, and they will each also vote for Biden, taking their electoral delegate vote and give it to Joe Biden so he can add it to his list. That's how we're getting to 270. So that's just a quick math of it. But here's the rub. The electors, the people who are chosen to do that job, are chosen by Congress. And so you have a situation where you could vote a certain way, and the electors could be sent to Washington to vote a different way. Because all of this has been based on a system where it's never been attacked like this. So it's always worked relatively well. But because we now have President Lysol, who's ready to destroy everything, we're finding out that we never had enough checks and balances to make sure that the electoral votes will follow the popular vote of the people in the state. So all of a sudden we realize, with something like me, I'm learning now that the electoral college, the electors of New York, could manipulate the situation where they give their vote to Trump even if he loses New York. And apparently the Trump campaign, Trump team, they've been going around looking for vulnerable states where they could do this. So it's not just about rhetoric anymore. He's not satisfied to just badmouth the mail-in election. He's going around making plans so that they can delegitimize votes. So if all of New York votes for Joe Biden, the delegates from New York, the electoral delegates, they could end up giving their votes to Trump. It would create a constitutional crisis, but one thing it would also do, it will keep Trump in office. He's literally working to just undermine what makes America America when it comes to elections. And if you're a supporter of Donald Trump right now, this is what you're supporting. You're supporting the end of this American experiment. Because after this, there's no going back. If he's able to achieve this, lose an election, both in popular vote and in electoral college, and still manage to stay president, you no longer have a president, you have a king. And the whole American experiment has been a movement to avoid being under a monarch. You escaped the monarch in England. You're now about to put yourself under a monarch. And of all monarchs, let me tell you this, even if America was ever going to end up with a king, I would hope it was a king that can spell, right? I hope America would get a king that can pronounce Yosemite and not call it Yosemite. That's all I'm saying. If anybody should be king in America, I don't think there should be a king. But if you're going to have a king, let's have one that can speak English. Not this guy, not this moron, not this imbecile. And I'm telling you that now, it looks like, oh, he's doing all this stuff. No, it's not him. It's all the people enabling him. It's the Mitch McConnells. It's the state legislators who are also seeing this as an opportunity for them to perpetuate power. He's not smart enough, but they are smart enough. They know better. Attorney General Barr knows better. And they're preparing to help him achieve his dream. America, let me tell you this. In order to avoid the demise of America right now, there needs to be an amazing turnout in these elections. There needs to be an overwhelming turnout. VCOI said, Canada, bro, we're really on the edge. We're really on the edge. And you're right, the Democrats, I mean, they slept. They've been asleep at the switch for a long time. And they're waking up a little late. Waking up late. Because he's been doing incremental, encroachments into the rule of law. And he's been getting away with them. Now, in fairness to the Democrats, they're not empowering the Senate. They're not empowering the White House. They're not empowering the judiciary. So I could see how their hands are a little bit tied. And up until 2 years ago, they were not empowering the House either. So there's some constraints on Democrats, but I feel like they should have still done more than they did, and it's frustrating to watch a great country like this go down the tubes. Even though you knew it was going to happen when they voted for rubbish, the day they elected Donald Trump was the beginning of the demise of this empire, because you do not hand over such a mighty experiment to the dumbest among you. That's what America did in 2016. We gave this great experiment, handed it over to the dumbest, most arrogant person we could find. And here we are. It's about to be over. America, it was nice knowing you. It was nice. We got militia in the streets now, organized militia, and nobody's worried. We have no one to question them. Why are they on the streets with guns? Why are they dressed in camouflage? Who are they? what are they going to do on election day? And you have a guy in the White House who's literally telling you he's not going to leave. Ladies and gentlemen, it should be disturbing enough. He did everything with what he did with the what do you call it, with the post office. That was already your first signal. Now, people, you are here. I'm not seeing. Drop me a comment. Let me see. If you're here, please drop a comment. Let me shout you out. Today is a whole bunch of things, but I just want to let you know, Donald Trump is turning this place quickly into a banana republic, and I don't know, ladies and gentlemen, I don't know what's gonna happen, but it's not good. It's not good. Let me see if I can play you what he said. So you can have
win, lose, or draw in this election. Will you commit here today for a peaceful transferal of power after the election? And there has been rioting in Louisville. There's been rioting in many cities across this country, red and your so-called red and blue states. Will you commit to making sure that there is a peaceful transferal of power after the election?
Well, we're going to have to see what happens. You know that I've been complaining very strongly about the ballots, and the ballots are a disaster.
I understand that, but people are rioting. Do you commit to making sure that there's a peaceful transferal of power?
We want to get rid of the ballots, and we'll have a very peaceful. There won't be a transfer, frankly. There'll be a continuation. The ballots are out of control. You know it, and
Did you hear that piece, ladies and gentlemen? Did you hear that? Donald Trump said there won't be a transfer. There'll be a continuation. That's his entire end game. There won't be a transfer. He could have said there might not have to be a transfer if I win. He could have said that. That's not his language. And this is not the first time he's told us that if he doesn't win, it was rigged. Really, America, you're okay with this? He said, get rid of the ballots and then you won't have to worry. Get rid of the ballots. Hey, listen, BC is now, I mean, he's mad, but he's got support. He's got supporters. And on a day like this, I wish I had Trump supporters watching so I could ask you the question. I would bring you on right now and ask you, how is this okay? How is this okay for your America? For the president to say there won't be a transfer. There'll only be a continuation. Have you so lost it that that's okay now? My goodness. This is Idi Amin Dada talk. This is all the villains in all the Bond movies. This is the guy. This is like the amalgamation of every evil leader you've ever met. Except that he's dumber than most. That's the only saving grace. He's too dumb. Because if he was smarter than this, we'd be in much more trouble. But I don't know how much more we can get to, because the problem is he's dumb. But there are some people around him who are really smart and who are ready to help him achieve his horrible dreams, because it's going to advance theirs. That's why Mitch McConnell is here condoning everything this man is doing. Mitch McConnell is rubber stamping everything he's doing, because Mitch McConnell knows that as long as Trump is here, he gets to do what he wants to do. So he doesn't care anymore, if he ever did. That's why Lindsey Graham doesn't care that he's been caught on tape going against the very thing he said to hold him accountable for. His word means rubbish now. But he doesn't care. Ted Cruz doesn't care. Even I tell you this, even your boy Mitt Romney is out here talking about, I'm going to support the nominee for the bench. I'm not crazy. After all this time, Mitt Romney making it look like, he's really down to like make sure that Trump doesn't overstep and all that. Nah, now that the chips are down, Mitt Romney's like, nah, I'm gonna support his nomination. Mitch, listen, DC, you're exactly right, and I think we're gonna do it. I think we're gonna do it because Mitch is a full episode. Mitch McConnell is a full episode. This turtle took away a nomination, a Supreme Court nomination, from the first African-American president of this country, had the nerve to tell us it was because it was an election year and that the next president should pick, only to turn around and tell us this year that what he meant was it was an election year with a Democrat president and a Republican Senate majority, and that could not have worked. For what reason, we don't know. I mean, Romney, the truth is whether Romney, the question for Romney is this. Romney's secure in Utah. That was why he could say all the stuff he was saying in the first place. I understand that he's a Republican and he wants the nomination, but he could have at least said one of those things that the others are saying that now he doesn't support, choosing a judge, before election. He could have said that because they could still choose it a lame duck session. He could just get thrown a bone, Mitt Romney. But nah, man, he's salivating over the Supreme Court justice. And you know what? That's his thing. But from today on, let it not be said that Mitt Romney is any kind of a rational legislator. He's shown his true colors. It turns out all the while he was doing all the other stuff he was doing it because he knew that even though he spoke out, nothing would happen because he was in a minority. He knew that. It's not a consequential, think about what John McCain did on the healthcare bill. That's right there. That's where you know somebody who's serious, because when it mattered, John McCain's vote was the vote. It was the difference maker in keeping Obamacare. You see, so when the chips were down, John McCain was like, yo, he put himself on the line. That's what I'm talking about. That's that moment for Mitch right now. And Mitch is showing who he is. So good luck to him on that. But now we know that we don't have anyone on that side just reasonable. All of that was just a show. Mitch McConnell is showing his true colors. Congrats to Mitch. And the other things he did was because he's safe in Utah. So it wasn't really like, we were grateful for it because we were so desperate to have one voice on that side that would sound reasonable. But we know what Mitch is about. Ladies and gentlemen, we're in a fight for the soul of this country, and I hope everybody comes out and votes, because the only way to really counter this Russian aggressor in the White House is to overwhelm the ballot box. Is to overwhelm even the in-person votes. We can overwhelm that, because their plan is to announce. It's been making rounds that one of the things that Donald Trump wants to do is announce on election night, if he looks like he's leading, he will just take the victory that night and want to invalidate all the mail-in vote that will be counted the days after, make it look like we're not going to count anymore. He's got his lawyer stationed to stop the count, to invalidate mail-in ballots, all that. The question is whether or not all the states will go along with it. And that's why it's dangerous that they're meeting with state governors, the state legislators, to undermine this whole process at the state level. I think that's the real danger. With all this rubbish he's saying on the national level, it's nothing. I've not been too worried, only because I know that elections happen in states. But if they're really getting a headway into the states, if they're making the states, promise them that they will do what they want, then we're in real danger. So we need to vote, and you need to hold your state legislator account. As a matter of fact, there should be a movement right now. We should ask our state governors to ensure, to promise that the electors of our state will not betray us. Every governor must sign an undertaking right now that the electors of the state will follow the rules and will elect whomever the people of the state elect. They need to do something right now. People need to start making that noise. Every state elector must be made to basically attest to the fact that, or to affirm that they will not go against the votes of the people in the state. Bro, Nigerian politics is looking very grown up right now compared to what this dude is doing. This is next level rigging. Can you understand how an incumbent president is guaranteeing you that the election will be rigged? And he's supposed to be the one to make sure that the country is in a good place to vote. But he's the one telling us that it's not going to work, that we're not going to be able to vote right. And he's talking about the courts are going to be the ones to determine why. Because he's going to lose. And this, for the first time, it's clear to me that Trump will lose the election. For the first time. There's no way he's behaving like this. There's no way he's this desperate. Unless he's already seen it. My goodness, his internal polls must be horrible. That's why he wants to invalidate the process altogether. He must know. And I'm pleading with all the people who call themselves Trump supporters to open their eyes. Please change your mind from going after this guy. This guy is literally telling us that he's going to blow it all up because it's looking like he's going to lose. Don't join him to blow it up. Let's keep this experiment going. We can still do better. We can still get there. Don't blow it up. It's a sad situation. BCO say this is rigged in 16 with Italy. If he loses, it was rigged. And now again, exactly. And the idiots in power are going along with it like there's no fire under their beds. Let me separate those. The idiots in power that you refer to, some of them don't mind. This is the real tragedy of this moment. That some of the people who should be speaking out right now, not only are they silent, they're helping him achieve it. Ted Cruz is out here talking about Joe Biden as the one who wants to contest the elections. As though we've not been here listening to Donald Trump undermine the mail-in vote for months. He says Joe Biden is the one who wants to contest the election. Well, as soon as he says that, Donald Trump comes up and talks about the Supreme Court. Basically, they don't mind because they're going to do good. Because don't forget, look, let's boil it down. There are people in this country, like in Nigeria, we talked about it. Here's one of the things, the parallels with Nigeria. In Nigeria, one of the biggest things that we've lamented, even as a child that I lamented was, okay, how can we get electricity to work in Nigeria? How can we get stable electricity? And one of the things that's come up is that it's hard to do because a lot of people in power are invested in the malfunctioning system as it stands. So you have people who are generator importers. So they are there to say if the electricity comes back on, people are no longer going to need generators. That's going to destroy that whole industry. That's number one. Number two, there are people who just like determined to embezzle whatever money is allocated to fix the electrical grid. They're embezzling it. So you have those two areas, just those two cankerworms that are eating at the system. And if that's the case, there is no hope. Now we have America, people who are invested in Donald Trump destroying the nation, turning it into a authoritarian nightmare. Because the truth is, in that chaos, they can siphon money, right? For them, it's like it's an opportunity. With Trump as president, already he's made millionaires and turned them to billionaires. All his friends. Now he's made people who are middle class disappear and end up in the poorhouse. So the disparity, the wage gap has increased. So there are those who are supporting this man because they're getting what they want while he destroys the country. I'm hoping there's more of the rest of us who don't want this country destroyed, and we will come out and do the right thing on November 3rd. Ladies and gentlemen, it's your boy JFK. It's a strange one today, and I didn't get to RBG. May she rest in peace. Supreme Court. I'll see if I can on that next week. I think there are a few developments coming up. Look at strategies, what the Democrats can do, before this person is nominated and confirmed. What they can do afterwards. That's another option. I think there are more options afterwards. Because I'm sorry, but I don't think there's much to stop McConnell and Trump from filling that seat. Just procedurally, it can be delayed, make it a little more complicated for them, make it cost them a little bit more, but stopping them, I don't think so. I think Donald Trump will be able to put somebody in the seat, either before the election or after the election, but definitely before the next presidential term begins. So I think that's foregone conclusion. I'm sorry. I think it's set up in a way where they can do this. And but I do think that there are remedies for afterwards. There are things, if for instance, the Democrats take over the Senate in the next election, if the Democrats win the Senate and they have the House of Representatives, I think there are options of what they can do. There are options of what they can do to remedy the situation and put it out. I'm looking for the best way to couch it so that it doesn't look like, oh, I'm predicting something. But let me take BC's comment. Say they can be billionaires, but they will not go to heaven or hell with it. Their children will blame it on kush or something useless like that. BC, you know how it is, man. People don't care about that. You can preach to them about that, like, oh, all this money, what are you going to look? People will say, you're telling me I can't take my money to heaven. Like, that's not the conversation I'm having with you. Like, my conversation, give me the money. Forget about where I can take it. I'll decide that. You just get me the money. Let me just get my hands on the money. And that's how people see it. It's how people say a lot of people are just out here for themselves, and it's becoming clear. So don't expect them to do the right thing. But for anyone else, we can do the right thing, and I hope that we can make that change. So that's how we're going to go. So ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to put it like that today. It's your boy JFK. I'm going to catch you on the flip side. We're working on our election day episode. So watch out for that. We're gonna try to do it big. But until then, be safe. Let's keep fighting, and we have a shot to get it right, but we need to do it. BC, yeah, I'm gonna hit you up. Just give me later tonight. I'll get you up, and we talk about that whole setup. It's a crazy day, crazy day. R.I.P. to Breonna Taylor. R.I.P. RBG. There's a lot going on. 2020 continues to be strange. I didn't even touch on COVID today, but you already know what it is. Over 200,000 Americans gone. You know, and what can you say about that? Speaks for itself. There's no need to have a whole nothing about that. All right, I'm gonna talk to y'all later. Peace.